There we go. In the initial verse, in the initial telling, when God told Abraham about the slavery of Egypt, there were 5 things that were mentioned. Number 1, you'll be a foreigner in a land that's not your own. Number 2, you'll be enslaved. Number 3, you'll be oppressed. 4, the enemy, the country that enslaves you, will be punished. And number 5, you'll end up with a lot of money. You'll come out with a tremendous amount of wealth. So in Egypt, they suffered, right, as being foreigners. They were looked upon as being different. They were slaves. They were oppressed. But what is the greatness? What is the lesson for us, for the Jews, that the Egyptians got punished? It's important that the people that persecute us should get punished. But why is that such a lesson? So I'm going to tell you a fascinating idea that happened by the splitting of the sea, about how the Egyptians got punished after the Jews walked out when the sea split. And I think this really will answer that question of the value of seeing the punishment of the Egyptians. There's a great commentator named the Netziv, and he makes a comment on this verse. The verse says, after the Jews went through the splitting of the sea, and the sea split, they went through. And after the Egyptians drowned, the verse says, they feared in God, and they believed in God and Moshe, his servant. And the Netziv asks an amazing question. Only now, after the sea split and they were saved and the Egyptians were drowned, only now they had belief in God? The 10 plagues didn't create belief in God. Leaving Egypt, everything until now did not have belief in God. Only now the Torah says they had belief in God. Why now? It should have been much earlier already. I mean, at least maybe it's a stronger level of belief in God. But belief in God, you should have said after the plague of blood already. There was already such an amazing, occurrence, amazing miracles through all the 10 plagues. Says the Netziv an amazing, amazing thing. You see, how do you know God is completely just and fair? Maybe God is, irrational, illogical sometimes, very powerful, very strict. How do you know God is measure for measure and completely just? Says the Netziv that the Jews were able to perceive through a vision, through like almost a prophecy, how each Egyptian was drowning. And they were able to see how the Egyptians that persecuted them and the Egyptian that was the one that was beating him, exactly how he was drowning, and seeing the measure for measure of how God punishes somebody who hurt somebody else or harmed somebody else. And that was an amazing, amazing clarity about God's just. I mean, picture this. They were able to see the Egyptian guy who beat him for 10 years, dying in the most cruel or difficult, way, most punishable way, and getting measure for measure exactly of what he did wrong, getting punished. And that was a level of faith in God that you could not deny it at all. It was such a clarity of mind about the greatness of God and his just, and that God is completely truthful and completely honest, and that everything has a plan, and if we don't understand the plan, that's okay, because we know God is completely just and honest, and that was that clarity of belief in God. And therefore, it was so important as being a Jew and being, cultivating the Jewish nation, commencing the Jewish nation at this time, to see the punishment of the Egyptians measure for measure, to go into being in that, going into that relationship with God, being so confident that everything God does is perfect. And the way to see that was through the punishment of the Egyptians. And that's why that was part of the criteria of the initial, verse and initial discussion of the Jews going down to Egypt and learning these lessons, was the lesson of the Egyptians getting punished. I think that's phenomenal. As well, the last thing in the verse is, it talks about the great wealth they'll come out of Egypt from, whether it was out of Egypt or out of after the splitting of the sea. They got great wealth. And why is that so fundamental in the beginning of the nation of the Jewish people? Why is it so important that they have so much wealth? So I have an idea or two as well. You see, money is maybe the greatest deterrent to someone following God. Because when a person has a lot of money, he thinks about his ability, his strength, his great knowledge of finance, his great ability to to make a lot of money, to make a lot of great deals. And it's very easy for a person to say it's him, not God. So money is a deterrent to following God. Said, God, you're going to walk out of Egypt with a ton of money. That money was a gift from me, right? It wasn't money that you earned on the stock market or in a good deal. And not only that, you have no real value for that money for the first 40 years just sitting in the wilderness. You see that the money you have, it can't buy you anything. The way they were sustained in the wilderness was the manna from heaven, right? The God-given food. Even their clothes grew with them. They had no expenses. So here you see that money is being put aside. It's not the main thing. It's something which is needed. Of course, it's needed in life, but it's not the priority. And God was showing them you have tons and tons of money, overload with money, but no value for it in the wilderness. Because the lesson of going through the entire wilderness 40 years with the manna from heaven was to learn about understanding that the money comes from God. And it's just a way to get the certain things that you need. You have to work, it's part of life. But it's not the goal. It's not the focus. The focus has to be Yiddishkeit, Judaism. And therefore, again, coming out with a lot of money and having the money and not being able to use it and come to the recognition that everything comes from God and the focus should be God and Judaism, not the money. That was a tremendous, tremendous lesson the Jews needed to have, a lesson to become the Jewish nation. Needed to have that lesson to become the Jewish people. And that was part of the lesson of Egypt.